Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast with me, your host, Kristy Houle, where we dive into the hottest topics in education. On today's episode, Jessica Sinarski, licensed professional counselor of mental health, will be discussing strategies and resources for educators and parents to help children identify their emotions and process them in a healthy way. Jessica has extensive postgraduate training and 15 plus years as a clinician and educator, which has led her to create the resource and training platform, Brave Brains. She is also a published author of a children's book series, which we will get into within this episode. And I'm excited to say has a brand new resource coming out very, very soon that we will also jump into. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kristy.
All right, so Jessica and I have already been chatting offline, I guess I'll say. But I think we've already really kind of started to dive in, Jessica, into really what the heart of your platform is, which is, assisting the adults, educators, parents, anyone that might be involved in a child's life, assisting them and giving them the resources that they need to help children that come to us with any type of trauma or loss or grief or feelings and all those things that kids come to us with. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into doing that kind of work.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It has to be both. If we're going to help the kids, we have to help the grownups. That's just because the grownups need the kids need the grownups. So that's it has to be both. And I've had a roundabout way into what I'm doing now. My background was in mental health, and I have always loved diving deep with people. And when I first started working in foster care in the South Bronx, right out of graduate school, it became clear very quickly that I did not know what I needed to know to be helpful. And so that set me on a path to figuring out what the heck was going on and how I could come alongside in a way that was meaningful. And learning about the brain in particular and how our behavior is impacted by what's going on in our brain and trauma and resilience, that was really the shift for me. So my wait list kept getting longer and longer as we were having some success in the counseling room. But it was clear that the message was not getting out in the broader society in a meaningful way. So we have all this stuff coming down from neuroscience that's not reaching the educators, the parents, the grandparents that need it desperately to help their kids. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started doing, is putting super complicated stuff into a really not just kid-friendly, but adult-friendly language to make sense of these vulnerable parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a couple of things there that I want to hit on right off the bat. And one is, we have so many, children have so many challenges when they come in to any kind of educational setting, right? It could be a public school, a private school. And so, which has shifted a lot since COVID, we obviously all know that. So my first question is going to be, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing? Like, what are children mostly coming to us with, and why aren't we able to really, I guess, break that seal and really jump in and help them?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenges I see are around the disconnection happening for kids. So in a couple different ways. So kids feeling disconnected from each other. We saw social skills drop. We saw a big impact there, as well as kids, the prevalence of screens, the things that are drawing everyone's attention away toward entertainment, toward quick fixes, that is lowering our skill set, our ability to feel and deal, to be bored, to wrestle with tough stuff, because it's easier to just play a game for 5 minutes than to actually just sit and wait. And sitting and waiting is part of being human. I was turning on my computer and something popped up like, your Wi-Fi is not connected. Do you want to play a game while you wait? I'm like, no, I can just wait. It's going to be okay. So I think there's that whole push where kids aren't getting lots and lots of practice at building some of these human skills. And then as far as, why are we as adults not maybe stepping up in the ways that would be most helpful. I think there's a couple things happening there. I think one factor is we don't always have the right information. There's a lot of misinformation out there about, well, you just need to, spank that child and then they'll behave, or you need to rule your classroom with an iron fist, and that's the only way that kids will fall in line. And we know from like the science bears out that that's not helpful for building these social and emotional skills. And then also, change is hard. So if you're used to doing things a certain way, or if there's a habit that you've slipped into that's maybe easy and a little bit rewarding to your brain, like, being on your phone or doing other things rather than hanging out with your kids or teaching them to do laundry and you just do it yourself because it's easier than teaching them to do it. Those little moments so it's missed opportunities, but it's also just adults being a little bit in autopilot. Change is hard on the brain, and it takes a little bit of upfront energy to decide, okay, I know play and playfulness is really healthy for kids in the classroom setting. So I'm going to choose to figure out how I'm structuring my lessons that value that part of how kids function, instead of sort of going with the worksheet of the day or, business as usual in education.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've probably spent a lot of time in schools, right? So as I'm listening to what you're saying, and you're talking a lot about the breakdown between adult versus child, because, kids are coming to us and, we would sometimes, and I listen, you were talking about that I would rather just do their laundry for them than explain. And when we were off recording, we were both talking about our children and how we have boys. And, I'm guilty of that, to be honest with you, having 3 teenage boys. Sometimes it is easier just for me to throw in the laundry and wash the football gear and and make the macaroni and do whatever, as opposed to stopping and teaching how to do it and being patient and doing those things. You're like, I'll just do it. Right. So I can, I know that in classrooms and the teachers and parents that are listening to this conversation right now are saying, yes, it's just so much easier. But as you said, that's not really helping the child learn how to cope and deal. What are some strategies, or what are some quick things? I really want to give folks today real things that they can take from this during our conversation as this goes along, what they can do.
One of the things I keep in mind is this concept of sharing the power. I think when I talk about the upstairs and downstairs brain, and that downstairs brain is survival mode, it's your defense brain, it's that primal emotion and instinct. And when our downstairs brain takes over, when we are stressed, and there's been a heck of a lot of stress the last few years, then that part of our brain wants power and control. And so it wants to just get the laundry done. It wants to just cook the meal, or it wants to have kids sit still and be quiet, and I can just do things my way. Where the upstairs brain, our big human cortex and that prefrontal cortex, that part of our brain is how we create community. It's what we use for all those executive functioning skills, all the planning and organization kinds of things, but also to choose to share the power, to choose to be a we in this process. So at home, that might look like, okay, here's what has to happen this week for our family to function. These are the things that I'm thinking I can do. Who wants to do this? Who wants to do this? How can that look? Maybe it takes you 10 minutes. Maybe it takes you an hour the first time that you have that conversation, and you break it down. And with your younger kids, there's going to be a lot of like doing it with them for a while, which we know takes longer. But the beauty of this share the power mentality is that a week, a month, a year from now, that's a kid who's then able to throw a load of laundry in, or get dinner started while you're still on the way home, or like these other pieces of the puzzle. So that's kind of been my model with my boys. And what's been kind of a really fun thing to see is they've hit this age where a lot of their friends maybe don't have the same chores or responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And they have been grateful to us for teaching them these things, because they feel, my 14-year-old's like, he knows how to make a few meals that he enjoys. He knows how to do his laundry. Like, he's not going to go into college or adult life without these basic skills. So what does that mean for the classroom? Because the coming alongside every single student, that gets exhausting. So here's where I think the magic of model, there's so many tools I want to share with the audience today. So let me decide a couple of them. So one is playfulness. We can playfully model what we expect. So instead of going into stern teacher voice, we can say, there's stuff everywhere in this classroom. Let's see, am I supposed to just drop my book right here? Let's see, when I have homework to turn in, I'm supposed to just leave it in my desk, right? No, of course not. Okay, show me all the steps. Let's practice all the steps. Do it together, get volunteers, really practice playfully those things that you need for your classroom to function, but also these are skills that are going to benefit kids. And when we practice in a playful way, when we get our whole bodies involved in the process, we are activating multiple parts of the brain that let the kid actually learn and remember what you're trying to do.
When I do these podcasts, I always like to remind people there are so many educators that or folks that are in a school setting that are in your child's life that aren't even in the classroom with them. Maybe they're in the 100%. Lunchroom. Maybe they're an office staff. Maybe they're a school resource officer. My oldest son, who's graduated now, actually his favorite person in the entire school for his whole career of high school was the lady in the lunchroom, one of the support staff. And that would have been who he would have went and talked to, right? And so we always have to remember that it's not always the classroom teacher that needs these resources. And I think sometimes we forget about that when we're doing our professional development in schools, but they all play a role. So with that being said, the person in your child's life, do you think that some of us grew up differently, than kids are growing up now? So I think some of our veteran teachers, do you think that maybe they're struggling because they don't know how to handle their own feelings about things? They've never been taught that, and I think on your website, you had said, I even wrote it down. Let me look at my notes. Helping adults become healers for children. And I absolutely love that phrase when I saw that. It's such a great way to capture how we can help the adults become healers. So what are some ways or reasons that you think that happens with the adults?
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is really important. Many of us learned to survive hard stuff by shoving it down, by trying not to feel, or finding some other outlet, controlling others so that we could deal with the feelings that they're. I'm trying to say there are lots of ways that we adapt to survive tough stuff. And sometimes that's by working hard and putting your nose down and not making waves. And there are certainly times that that's helpful. So one of the things I talk about in the Riley the Brave series is this concept of I think of the downstairs brain as having these protectors. Like we all have a tiger inside. We all kind of have a porcupine inside, or a turtle. We have these downstairs brain moments when we want to curl up in our turtle shell, or we want to lash out at someone else and the tiger claws come out. Whether you've experienced trauma or not, that's just part of being human. We can all relate to those prickly porcupine, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed mornings.
Right.
When you're dealing with trauma, or even like chronic stress and some of the stuff that comes into play that might have created some of that, just nod and say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, kind of behavior, there's a place for that. There's times that that's adaptive, but there are also times that that's problematic. And so if that's the way that you've learned to survive, and now you have a classroom full of kids who are finding their voice and learning that it's okay to feel sad about things, that's normal, or to be frustrated by injustice, or to be outspoken in certain ways, to be active in their education. Those are things we want in the adult population, but they're really hard to manage in the school setting. They're hard to manage as a parent. Even with my 3 boys, sometimes I feel like, my gosh, just obey. Like, I don't care. Just obey. Just do what I say, because I want my life to be easier.
Yeah.
But raising game changers, raising the next generation of people who are going to make the world a better place, that's messy. Teaching in a way, teaching for true learning is messy. In fact, I was just reading a study, I think it was, I'm going to forget where it was out of. I want to say Harvard, where they took 2 physics classes and they had, the smooth lecture, really great, like super engaging, like captivating lecture, not interactive, but great lecture. And then they had hands-on learning in this other group where they were interacting with the problems and working with the content in a different way. Same content, but delivered differently. The students thought that they learned more from the lecture, rated that class higher at first, but measures of true learning were higher for the hands-on practice. Our education system is often, a few decades behind the research of, hey, that great lecture might feel good. It might even feel good to your students sometimes, but true learning requires thinking it through and manipulating the data and working with your hands and stretching your brain. And that's messy and hard. And so it's easy to want to just do business as usual.
So as you're speaking about true learning, what you do, though, your resource, and this is what I absolutely love, is you are not going to get to true learning with a child unless they feel safe, unless they
100%.
feel secure. And so talk a little bit about the importance of that with, and I think it was Rita Pearson that once said, kids don't learn from someone they don't like or respect. And kids are smart. They are so smart, especially little kids. They get it. They know if you're genuine. They know if you really, truly care for them as a person. So talk a little bit about the importance of making that environment for children safe, secure, kind of, chipping away at the anxiety and things like that before they would even want to learn from you.
Yeah, you're pulling out something that, again, is evidenced in the research, that the foundational building block for learning is attachment. It's safe and secure relationships. So even what you were mentioning before about your son and the woman in the cafeteria being a trusted person for him, it is essential that we are encouraging relationships in the classroom beyond the teacher being the only trusted person for 25, 30 kids. That's not realistic, right? So we need those other resources in our schools. And as far as prioritizing that, what's funny about writing about these things is there's so much that comes down to the nonverbals. It's not about having the right script. It's not about, say these 3 magic words and everything will be great. I wish it were that easy, but really so much of it comes down to managing our own stress. And I'm not saying that to blame you for feeling stressed, but modeling like, hey, my tiger brain wants to take away recess, guys. So I'm going to walk it off here up front while we get quiet in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, that is so much better. Thank you. So in that little statement, I'm modeling that adults get stressed too, and we have to regulate. I'm giving language to that. I'm showing that I'm moving my body to discharge some of the energy so that I don't lash out at somebody else. I'm using a little bit of rhythm in the counting without being punitive in it. And listeners, I know you can't see my face, but so much is communicated in our body language, in our eyes. Is there warmth in your eyes? Or when you're asking for eye contact from your students, are you sending messages of threat? Half your students might comply and be fine with it, and you have enough trust that it works that way. But there is a big chunk of the population that is going to send those kids further into their downstairs brain. And not only is true learning not happening at that point, but behavior becomes dysregulated and everybody's day is miserable. I really think that's the magic of putting the science of safe and secure relationships in practice, that this this changes lives. Your day becomes not just battling stressor after stressor and power struggle after power struggle, but we're on the same team and we're in this together. And I can soften my eyes and send some safety signals to that kiddo who is ramping up because, I don't know, they didn't eat breakfast that morning, or they're wired differently. And so the same thing that bugs, one kid is different than what bugs another kid. Like, there's so many factors that might be setting students off. So just modeling and practicing our own stress management with our students is a fantastic way to create even more safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think, you said practice and model, because sometimes we do it unintentionally. We don't even realize, it's like, I remember a few times I would, when I was an administrator, I would walk in the building and it would be, 7:30 and I haven't even gotten in the building yet. And I have either a set of kids or a set of parents. And I'm like, fix your face.
Yes.
I have to so for people that are listening, it's totally natural and it's not always intentional, but we just get in our own head sometimes and we're not thinking. And, I told this story one other time. I have a younger sister, and when she was in middle school, or I don't remember what grade she is in, my dad would call me and say, your sister hates this teacher. She's not doing well in school. And I'm thinking, what is going on? She's always been a good student. She's always liked school.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal? So long story short, she genuinely didn't want to be in that class simply because when she went into the room every day, the teacher seemed really busy and never addressed her by her name to say good morning.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that teacher was not intentionally, maliciously trying to be unkind, but she had her own stuff going on. And, you've been in schools forever. I've been in schools forever. Everyone listening has been in this world of education, and we're human too. So to get stressed, you do have to, you have to practice, you have to say, okay, your face might look a certain way, or you might be thinking. So it is sometimes you have to just kind of work with yourself and give yourself some grace, I think, too, to practice and model, like you said.
Absolutely. I think, and as kids get older, those are conversations you can have. Mm-hmm. I remember one of my boys was sitting across from me at work. I forget why he was at my office with me, but I was working on the computer, and he kept saying, like, are you okay? Is everything all right? He was seeing my stress face. He was used to seeing me in mom mode and me fixing my face a lot, but he was just, I was concentrating even more. I wasn't upset or anything. And so sometimes if you have one of those faces that looks very stern, you have resting grumpy face, or that's just your natural stance, and you have older students, these are conversations that are worth having to say, all right, you might be reading, she's mad at me on my face, but this is just what I look like on Monday mornings. So I'm just saying what it is, and we're in this together. And, I'll do my best to be a safe teacher for you. And, here we go. Mm-hmm. Like, those are okay things to say. And knowing there are going to be some kids who, if you have resting grumpy face, are going to struggle. If you don't say hello to them, are going to struggle, even without trauma, but especially for your kids who've experienced trauma.
Yeah. Because they might see that at home all the time, and that's normal to them. And Okay. So let's talk about some of the amazing resources that you have. So I want to start with talking about Brain Braves, which is the website that you have. And it is listen, really, I've spent a lot of time on that. Like I told you when we started, I feel like I know you because I've seen your face so much from being on your website. There are really, truly so many good resources on there between, the books and the resources and the blog and all of the things.
So on bravebrains.com, you will find, I've really tried to make it easy for busy brains to go to, that I know you have a million things on your plate. And I just want to make it easy for you to go and grab a couple things, or, have a quick download or things like that. So there is a blog that shares all kinds of resources to help keep that upstairs, downstairs brain stuff straight. There are some downloadable things. There's links to some videos. The two places I would start there's a tips for teachers and there's a school counselor guide. Both of those, depending on your role, would be a great place to just kind of get oriented with putting the brain in mind in this kid-friendly way. And then there's some information there too about professional development. And I love what you said earlier about making sure that PD reaches all staff in meaningful ways. So I'm going to Kentucky next week to an elementary school that recognizes that. And so literally bus drivers, kitchen staff, like we're all going to be together to talk about what's going on in brain and body and how we can show up for ourselves so we can show up for our students in meaningful ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I know I said brain braves, but I know it's brave brains.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I was like, wait, that's not right. But I'm glad you just mentioned bus drivers, because I just saw a couple of articles in the news as well about how bus drivers are really, really struggling. Yes. And I mean, they're not equipped. They are just, and in some schools, the school resource officer, they aren't equipped because they've not come from a background of education. Maybe they've come from a background of working in a bank or in a mall as security, and now they're thrust into a building full of children. And so I think that it's so great that your resources are reaching all of the staff. And I want to point out something on your website that I loved was the uncomfortable conversations. I love that so much. And so if you guys are listening and you're with children and you don't feel like you know how to address an issue or address a conversation, because it is uncomfortable sometimes. And sometimes we don't know if we even have the permissions to even have this kind of a conversation with somebody else's child, which is a whole nother podcast we could do on the balance between appropriate conversations with the child and when do you get a parent involved. So we're going to maybe do a part 2, Jessica, because I feel like that could be like a whole, because, it's scary, you don't know how a parent is going to react when you speak to a child about a certain thing. And so there's a fine line.
Yeah.
But I love that. So for those of you listening or watching, find that uncomfortable conversations piece, because I love all the info and the blogs. There's just so much great stuff there that people can use. So I really, really love that. Now let's talk about your books, which I also love, because being a former elementary school teacher and loved reading books, I think these books are phenomenal. So you have the Riley the Brave series.
Yeah.
You also have a couple of other cute little books. What's Inside Your Backpack, Hello Anger, and then there's something new coming out. So talk a little bit about those resources for teachers and parents.
Sure. So the Riley the Brave series, like I said, my background was in foster care and pretty significant developmental trauma. And I couldn't find the resources that I needed. And that's sort of what put me on this journey a little bit. So the Riley series introduces these, without ever really talking about the brain, that in the story part, we see that Riley was brave like a tiger and he was brave like a turtle, and now he's learning new ways to be brave. So we're seeing a bear cub who's being raised by elephants, and the elephants are purposely not named and not gendered so that all kids can put themselves in the story. And that is consistent throughout. So there's Riley the Brave. Riley the Brave makes it to school for any kids that struggle with transitions. There's a lot of tools in there for that. And then Riley the Brave's Sensational Senses came out last September. And that is all about our hidden senses, as well as the 5 that we normally think about. Mm-hmm. And the latest for the Riley the Brave series is the Big Feelings activity book that comes out August 8th. And I am so excited to get it in people's hands, because it's really me trying to come alongside you with some language and tools and strategies that to make it just easier on your brain to create some of the change that I know will be so helpful for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you have them there, because even though that folks might just be listening to this as they're driving or working, but this is also offered as a video podcast.
Oh, awesome.
So I would love for you to show the covers of the books, because I love Riley so much. Look at him. Yay. Oh, there he is. So such great resources. And like you said, having those be available to not only read to kids, but for just kids to have access. That's because unfortunately, we have had such a paradigm shift of the way that the classroom is run, that it is such a tight schedule that we as teachers sometimes don't get that opportunity to sit down and sit on the carpet with kids as much as we want to, and read books as much as we want to. But it's great even just to have those resources on a shelf. for kids to pick up when they get curious and to look and to read that through themselves. So,
and that is some of the feedback I've heard, Kristy, is I've had teachers, I've gotten pictures, snapshots from teachers of, during free reading time or during when they have extra time after they've gotten something done, that these are books that are purposely appealing. It's not a drab, everything's terrible therapy book. Like it's very funny to me that I write therapeutic books, because there were not, when I was in practice, there were not very many that I liked because kids didn't want to read them. And I don't want to write something that kids don't want to read.
Yeah. So being a published author, I want to kind of switch over a little bit, because I know that's like a whole new big accomplishment in someone's life, is going from, the work that you're doing with students and children and all the wonderful things that you've done in your life, to now being a published author of books that really have meaning. Not that all books don't have meaning, some type of meaning to the author, but what is the impact that you want these books to have on kids who open them up and read them, or to kids that listen to the story? What do you want them to take away from these books?
One of the best things that I hear from readers is either from the kid themselves or often from the adult who is talking to me about it, is kids feeling seen. That I get messages about, I was reading this with my son and he said, "Mom, I think this is about me." And that it often is followed by, you don't know how much that means. Like that's so hard for him to say. That's so hard. Like most of the kids that I worked with did not feel seen. And so that's really something that I try to weave into my work. So the Riley series is animals because I wanted to let everybody sort of put themselves in it, sort of a blank slate. The Magic Backpack series, What's Inside Your Backpack and Hello Anger, these are purposely a diverse cast of characters, really intentionally thinking about who I'm representing and how, and making sure I'm having readers ahead of time from populations that are being represented to, while it's not an own voices experience, obviously as a white woman, that I want to make sure that I am communicating in ways that all kids can feel seen, regardless of ability or disability and neurodivergence and race and ethnicity and all of the factors that might leave kids feeling othered in society.
It's so important. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. Tell our listeners one more time where they can find you, where they can reach out, how they can contact you if they have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on social media at Jessica Sinarski, Sinarski. And you can find, as you heard, all kinds of good resources for educators at bravebrains.com, and then oodles of stuff for parents, counselors, therapists, helpers of any shape and size at jessicasinarski.com.
Well, thank you again. And listen, we really are going to come back and do a second episode, because I do think that conversation about what your role as an educator is when it comes to difficult conversations and topics, like what's the process look like? How should you handle that? When should the parents be, asked permission? When is it okay? Because that's really, kind of the heart of what we're talking about is getting to know a child and maybe some of their most personal, intimate things that are bothering them, and what is our role in that. So we'll definitely schedule a second one to come back and have that conversation. But thank you so much. This has been amazing. And for everybody that's listening, please go out and, check out the website. There are so many great resources out there. Even if you just read some of the blogs, there are just a ton of information. So Jessica, thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Kristy.
And this is Kristy Houle signing off for this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast.